What if I told you that you could copy your thoughts in the exact way that you think into an AI, creating what is essentially a digital clone of yourself that thinks like you, solves problems like you, and can help you with literally everything to anything in your day-to-day life, exactly the way that you want it to? Well, that is exactly what I'm going to show you how to do today. To those of you who are new, I'm Fabio, and I've spent over half a decade in the AI business and engineering spaces. And today, I want to show you one of the most powerful yet overlooked features in pretty much every commercial LLM out there. And we're going to start off with using ChatGPT as the baseline. And this feature is exactly how you turn any AI or LLM into your second brain, creating a digital personal assistant that knows you just as, or if not sometimes, better than yourself. And on a real note, this is actually something so simple and easy to do that I am still surprised at how many people either don't do it or don't even know that it exists. And on top of that, I'll walk you through a framework that I personally use to customize my own AI into my personal digital assistant and second brain, saving me hours of my time. So, without further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Alright, so let's break down how exactly to fill in this framework so that you can go ahead and customize any AI model that you see fit into your second brain. So the first section is the nickname. Pretty self-explanatory. If you want any AI or LLM to call you by some particular honorific or nickname, you can put it down there. But personally, I don't see much of a use with it. But if that's something that you're into, you can go ahead and do it if you like. The next part of the framework is the occupation side of things. And in this section, you write down exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis or in a business. This can be things like your title, your roles, or just how you spend your day-to-day time in general. And why does this matter exactly? Well, most LLMs are notorious for giving mostly generic answers when you ask about something specific that requires a specific foundation of knowledge or information that you yourself won't think to share. But by placing in your occupation, you are eliminating sections of that bigness. Now, the answers themselves will start to get tailored more and more to you. Hence, the theme of turning any AI into your second brain. The next part of the framework is what traits should the LLM or AI have. In ChatGPT, you fill out this part in the custom instructions section of the personalization. And this particular part of the framework has to do with how you want the AI to respond to you. So rightfully so, the first part we start off with this would be the style, which is all about, well, the style of the response itself. So if you're somebody who likes your AI responses to be more conversational and casual, as if you're talking to a friend, then you would put down that you would prefer a friendly, casual style of speech in this part. But if you're not fond of the long-ended exposition that you sometimes get when talking to an AI like ChatGPT, then in this part you can say that you just want pure, direct response answers. So it pretty much varies based off how you'd want the AI to respond to you. The next part of this section of the framework would be the depth. So this all has to do with information. Like I said before, most AIs, when you ask them about something specific or even vague in some cases, you get a long-winded piece of text that's just purely expositional, and it can get annoying at points. So in the depth part of the framework, this is where we change that so that it can give you the right amount of information that you want. So if you're someone who likes that exposition, especially if you're trying to learn something new about new concepts, then you can go with the AI responding to you with detailed explanations and put that down in this section. But if you don't want that exposition, then you can go with putting down pure direct response only, Or if you like something in between, you can go with something like a brief summary. And my 2 cents on this is that you can go about this section in 2 particular ways. The first one is that you put down a variety of options of the different ways that you would want the LLM to be able to respond to you. And then you specify which one of those methods you would want in the prompt itself. The second one would be to put your most preferred type of response that you would most frequently want to see from the LLM in this section. And then if you want to specify something different, you would then explicitly state that in your prompt. And if you want to go with what I use personally, I go with the former option, where I just put down all the different types of responses that I want, giving slight descriptions as to which settings where I'd want to see which description. And then I specify exactly which type of response type I would want in the prompt itself. The next part of the framework would be the sources and the links. So when it comes to gathering information from any AI, you want to prevent hallucinations, and you also want to prevent getting false information from non-credible sources. Unfortunately, with most large language models that are trained off a plethora of information, vetting for proper sources may not be that high up on the agenda when training these AIs. So in order to navigate through what you can count as credible and what you can't, we have the sources and links section where you specify which sources that you trust and what you would prefer for the AI to look at when it's gathering information on your behalf. This can range from industry reports, peer-reviewed journals, tutorials from YouTube, from your favorite thought leaders, and so on and so on. The next part of the framework would be examples. So this isn't to say that you have to put down an example of what a perfect response is to every single scenario that you got. That'll be insane. More so, this is more tailored to if you're trying to learn something new, where you'd put down the types of examples that help you learn better. So for me personally, I like analogies or stories when I'm trying to learn something new. So in my customization, I'll put down in the example section, use stories and analogies as part of your explanations for better understanding. But if you're somebody who likes to get pure step-by-step breakdowns from A to Z as to how to do something anytime you're learning something new, then you can put that down here as well. The next part of the framework would be teamwork. This is all about collaboration. How would you want to collaborate with the AI or LLM model? Again, if you're somebody who doesn't like all that pure exposition and all the random suggestions that an AI typically tends to respond with anytime you ask it something, then you can put in that you just want pure direct response and nothing else. And then the AI will be customized for that exact style to a T. But if you're somebody who likes a bit more collaboration or guidance and likes to bounce back ideas back and forth with the AI, then you can add additional features in the section like questions or frameworks or feedback loops. That way, anytime you're bouncing back ideas back and forth with an AI, it will be able to respond in such a way that will get you to think deeper about the subject that you're looking into as a whole. And the last part of this framework would be the approach. This typically just talks about how you would want the AI to go about solving problems. And my 2 cents of this is to go based off how you think. So if you're a more logical person and you want to analyze the problem and look at all the ways all the puzzle pieces fit together, then you can write down based off how you think that you'd want the AI to as well go through a logical analysis when it's solving a problem. If you're somebody who likes to break down a big problem into small bits, then in that case, you can go with a systematic breakdown method of approach. But if you're somebody who just likes to come up with all the crazy ideas as to how to make something work, then maybe something like creative brainstorming is more suited for the approach for your custom second brain. But again, the basis of what you pick in this section has to do with how you think and go about solving problems in general. And that brings us to the last section of the framework, which is the more about you part. In most AIs or LLMs, this can either be exactly as it was titled, the more about you, or something like in ChatGPT, what else should ChatGPT know about you? And this section is all about giving it context about who you are, what you do, what you're working on, etc., in as excruciating detail as you feel, well, comfortable doing. And if I'm being honest, this is pretty much the difference between just having a custom AI to getting an actual second brain. So let's go ahead and break this down. The first part of this section in the framework would be the responsibilities. This is just pretty much what are you responsible for on a day-to-day basis. So whether it's something like coaching or mentoring, or even if you're just a student, that you would put this down here. That way it knows what you're dealing with, and its responses will be tailored to helping you in fulfilling whatever your responsibilities may be. The next part of this framework is skills. This is where you lay down what you're good in or an expert in and what you're proficient in, but maybe more amateur-esque in. This section is pretty much to do with when you're asking any AI specific questions, the specific field or topic that requires some level of expertise, like coding or marketing or sales. When it comes to any one of these things, if you are proficient in it, you wouldn't want the AI to explain it to you as if you are a child, because you obviously understand the fundamentals and the basics of what it is that you're asking. But if you're a beginner, then at that point, it will begin with the breakdown, the exposition, or the response that you filled out in the other section, so that it can help you understand much better on a topic that you may not be familiar with. The next part would be the challenges. This is pretty much just what stresses you out on a day-to-day basis, or what task in particular do you find yourself getting stuck on. And the main point of this section of the frame is to help the AI tailor its answers in such a way that it is helping you solve those challenges or solve those problems when the topic relates to them in some way. Next part is all about the projects that you're currently doing. So whether you're dealing with something like a product launch or a course or creating a new campaign, this part is all about telling it the specific projects that you are dealing with, and the more detail in this section that you can comfortably provide, the better. Because the more background information that it knows about whatever projects that you're dealing with, the better it can help you in solving particular tasks on said projects anytime you ask it to. And the next part would be industry-specific terms. So most terms or acronyms that are used in some industries, you can find in others that are completely different from each other. And in this section, you lay out such terms and their meanings. So take, for example, I used to compete in swimming, right? So there's this specific term in the medical field, specifically for swimmers, called IPO, and it translates to immersion pulmonary edema. In layman's terms, that just means when you can pretty much damage your lungs or what. But on a lighter note, in the business space, IPO would translate to initial public offering, which is when a private firm decides to open up investment from the public. So in order to essentially make the AI know the difference and know exactly what you mean when you say a certain acronym or term, you would put down the most prominent industry terms that you have in this section. Moving on, the next part would be all about the goals. So this would be short-term and long-term. And again, the more detailed, the better. And writing down the goals in this framework is all about giving the AI something to aim for, something to target. Again, the whole point of creating the second brain is so that it can help you in solving problems in ways that you would want it to. So if you have a goal that you want to achieve by a certain day, or you just have a bunch of goals that you want to achieve in certain date will, if you write them all down, it will rank them based off hierarchy. And anytime you ask it about some topic relating to a specific goal, or if it sees some key insight that may relate to another one of your goals, it will now begin to tailor its response in such a way to help you in achieving said goal. And now the last part of the framework would be all about the communication style. This pretty much talks about how you most often communicate with others. So if you're somebody who communicates more over emails or phone calls, or even videos or in person, telling the AI the method through which you most frequently communicate with other people, or the methods, this will essentially help it in formatting its answers to any specific topics that you may or may not have implied that you would want to communicate to an audience, where it can either suggest it or it can go ahead and write it down if you state it explicitly in the particular format and tone that most closely resembles you. That is, if you filled out this framework section by section. And that pretty much sums up all the sections of the framework. So now I'll take you through my personal customization and how I use the framework to create what is essentially my own second brain in ChatGPT. Okay, now that we've gone through the relevant parts of the framework, let's go through my personal customization so that you guys can get a better understanding as to how to use this framework for yourselves. So I've just gone ahead and opened up ChatGPT on a tab, and pretty much all you need to do is go down here to your profile and click on it, and then click on the personalization tab, and then you will get this pop-up that you see right here. And this is where we're going to use the framework to customize our ChatGPT into our second brain. So the first part is obviously you got to have this on. You can do everything in the framework right, but if you do not have the enabled customization on, then nothing will happen. Nothing will change. You'll keep on getting the generic answers, the exposition or what have you, and everything and anything that you do not explicitly want the AI to respond with. The next part is the personality. This is something that you sometimes see in some LLMs like ChatGPT or Claude, where you're able to pretty much customize the personality of the AI when you're talking to it. So for ChatGPT, for example, if you click on the option, you get all these different selections that you can make, from default to robot to nerd to listener to cynic. So personally, I just leave this in default for one particular reason, which is it is adaptive, which means that it is capable of responding to different types of situations outside of the general scope of what you would typically ask of it, leading to better answers and better conversations overall with the AI when you're talking to it. But if you prefer any other type of personality, you can take a pick out of these options and see which one works best for you. But for me personally, I just leave it as default. And it's just a further way to refine the custom instructions part of the framework of the AI itself, which, if you remember, is just how you would want the AI to act and respond in the first place. So on that note, let's go ahead and look at the custom instructions. So first off, you got the style, where I put use a casual, friendly tone and avoid excessive use of emojis. This is just something that personally noticed that I don't particularly like the amount of emojis that the AI typically uses, where it uses like a ton when it's answering any questions that I may have or ask of it. And just putting this in just prevents such things from happening. My personal depth is to use a mix of detailed explanations and brief summaries. You can get whatever amount of information that you personally like and find appropriate for you. Next, we go through the sources, which for me, the credible sources that I would like it to look at is industry reports, peer-reviewed journal, industry leaders, and any other credible sources that it can find. I'm telling it what I trust or who I trust, what sources do I trust, and where it should look at primarily for any answers when I wanted to research on something that requires some level of credibility. And with it, it kind of works hand in hand with the links side of things, where I further specify among the sources, I would prefer it to use links from academic articles, how-to guides, video tutorials, online courses, ebooks, and best practices from external sites or sources for more detail. So I separated these. You can pretty much combine them into one if you'd want. And the framework as it is right now does have them combined because realizing that it's a bit redundant to have source and link separated. So I kind of just combined them into two. But I guess in this case, for my personal customization, I just kind of have them separated. The next part is examples. So again, like I said, I personally like the use of analogies or stories or metaphors or similes when I'm trying to understand complex topics. So that's exactly what I put in the examples tab, where I say explain any complex topics using analogies, examples, metaphors, or similes so that they are much more easier to understand. Then when we move on to the teamwork side of things, I personally like to bounce off ideas back and forth between me and the AI until I get an answer that I would prefer or that I find to be ideal. So in this case, I just, ask the AI to use collaborative brainstorming and guided explanations to form direct answers. That way, when I'm trying to figure something out, I'm brainstorming back and forth my ideas and the AI's ideas to each other. And if I needed to further explain a particular idea, then I can ask for it to give me a guided explanation on it, which just helps me in gaining further insight on the topic as a whole. And then the last part is the approach. So again, this part is based off how you think. And like I stated previously, you can do this in one of two ways that you find preferable. You can either specify many ways that you know how to think, and this kind of also goes hand in hand with the depth side of things, but you can specify the many ways that you would like the AI to think that is similar to the way that you think. And then you further specify or you point out which one that you would prefer in the prompt that you're asking of it, or in the prompt that you're going to send in to the AI. And that's exactly what I did here, where I said, hey, I want you to use a mix of logical analysis, creative brainstorming, and systematic breakdown. So now I have all these options that then I can pick which one specifically that I would want it to use for a particular topic. Or you can go with the second option where you pick one method of approach that you mainly use and you list that as the primary and only method of approach. And then after that, if you would want to go for something different, you would then tell the AI explicitly in the prompt itself. So me, for example, I tend to like to break things down into systems. So if I were to go with the latter option, I would put in as the primary method of approach to be a systematic breakdown of ideas or topics. But let's say that I'm trying to come up with a new idea for something, like a project that I'm trying to do. In that case, I don't need a systematic breakdown to come up with an idea for a project. What I need would be creative brainstorming. So in the prompt itself, I would override its current method of approach, which is systematic breakdowns by default based off the custom instructions. And I would put down use creative brainstorming for this topic. And that's pretty much how you go about it. And then mix up the custom instructions portion of the framework. So now we move on to the about you portion of the framework itself. So from the first part of the framework, you have the nickname. You can put in whatever you want here. Personally, I see no use in it, but I don't know. If there's something where you would prefer for the AI to call you by some particular name, then you can go ahead and put it down here. The next part is all about your occupation. These are the roles and the jobs that you perform daily. So for me, you got engineer, AI agent builder, entrepreneur, digital marketer, coach, consultant, all these things, teacher, and you can just list out all the typical roles, jobs, and assignments that you particularly perform. And then the more about you part, this part has a lot of detail. Like I previously stated, the more detail that you can put in comfortably, the better. And the more adapted the AI can be to becoming more like a second brain for you. But just going over it briefly, you got the responsibilities, you got the skills, you got the challenges, you got the goals, and you got the communication. And you just have to list out pretty much the exact way that is laid out in the framework. So for responsibilities, one of them, for me personally, is teaching and explaining complex topics. For skills, you got something like using AI for automation. For goals is to something like building a brand, or for communication is through something like writing, email, face-to-face in-person speak, or videos. And then for some additional stuff, you have the memory section of the personalization, which is all about what ChatGPT is allowed to remember and what it's also allowed to bring up. So ChatGPT and other AI and LLMs model have a memory based off what you ask about. This is just a way for the AIs and the companies that design the AIs to make it more convenient for users, because it helps with the AI's ability to remember on certain topics so that you don't have to bring them up every single time. So when it comes to memories, you can have these two tabs open, which have to do with allowing the AI to refer back to saved memories. That way it can kind of look back in the history of previous conversations, and if it's a similar topic or a topic that relates, or maybe if it's even the same topic, it can bring that into the conversation for the particular topic that you're asking on. Or to reference chat history, which has to do with the chat itself, where you're having the conversation with it, so that way it can look further back in time from the beginning of the conversation up to a limit, and then be able to refer back to that when responding to you. That way it's not completely starting from a blank slate anytime you decide to continue on with a conversation with the AI. And then you have the reference or the record mode. This mostly has to do with files that you uploaded into the AI. So if you uploaded something like an Excel sheet or a PDF, this is just allowing it to be able to refer back to these files if they relate to the topic that you are having a conversation about. And lastly, we have the advanced section of the personalization. At least with ChatGPT and most other LLMs out there, like Claude, DeepSeek, or something like Perplexity or what have you, they have certain capabilities beyond just typing. And here is where you can pretty much toggle whether you want it to be able to use those additional abilities or whether you don't. So by default, I would personally say just keep all of these on because it doesn't hurt. And it's not really going to affect anything in a major way, whether you use a certain feature or whether you don't use a certain feature. Like, for example, most people don't use ChatGPT to code. So it doesn't hurt to leave it on, because if you're not using it to code anyways, it's not really going to affect your day-to-day conversations or your day-to-day life with ChatGPT or with any other LLM model. But if you really want to, you can just turn it off, and then at that point, the AI will no longer have the ability to code in its conversations with you. But to be honest, I think it's just too much of a hassle. So better off to just leave everything on by default. And that is pretty much it. So hopefully you guys know how to use the customization for your own personal second brain or a digital clone, as you've now seen how I've personally used it in an AI like ChatGPT. And I try to make this framework to be capable of working within the majority of AIs out there. So you can go ahead and use this in ChatGPT if you want, or in something like Claude, or in something like DeepSeek, based off the capabilities and whether you're allowed to have a personalization. So most people think that AIs or LLMs are just tools, but if you use it right and use this framework right, it can become so much more. Dare I say, it can become your second brain or digital clone. Better yet, it can become your strategist or assistant or whatever else that you can come up with that you would want it to do. And the best part is, you only have to set this up once. So if you want the framework, I've gone through the liberty and put it down in the description down below. But until next time, I'm in your corner and I am rooting for you.